car, right now!
I'm not moving, officer.
Hands where I can see them! Get out!
I know the law.
I said out of the car!
Section 38.2 Virginia Code says I don't have to exit the vehicle on a traffic.
At 10:42 p.m. on Tuesday, Sergeant Dave Riggs made an error that cost Louisiana taxpayers $8.5 million. You are about to witness exactly how a corrupt career ends in mere seconds. Riggs scanned the wet asphalt of Interstate 20 like a predator hunting for weak prey. He was not looking for speeders, but for drivers who looked like they would pay cash. A gray Ford Taurus with out-of-state rental plates drifted into his view in the slow lane. It was the kind of car that tourists or drug mules drove to blend in. Riggs smiled because he knew that rentals were easy targets for asset forfeiture seizures without trial. He did not know the driver was a man who destroys police departments for a living. The sergeant flipped his lights, signaling the beginning of the end for his entire precinct. This was a routine shakedown. Or so he thought, until the target did not panic. The car did not swerve or brake check, which instantly annoyed the aggressive officer. Riggs expected fear, but he was about to encounter a force far more dangerous than resistance. Marcus Thorne watched the flashing blue lights in his rearview mirror with a calm, detached focus. He checked his speedometer, which read exactly 54 miles per hour in a 55 zone. He signaled for 3 full seconds before merging onto the dark, gravel-strewn shoulder of the highway. Most drivers would be frantically searching for their registration, but Marcus simply placed his hands on the steering wheel. He lowered his window and turned on the interior dome light to show he was unarmed. This was textbook compliance, yet it only served to irritate the officer walking toward his door. Riggs saw the perfect posture and assumed it was the arrogance of a career criminal. He unsnapped the retention strap on his holster as he approached the driver's side window. The sergeant had no probable cause for this stop, but in his town, he was the law. He peered inside, expecting the smell of fear, but found only a pair of cold eyes. Marcus did not speak first, forcing the officer to break the silence and reveal his intent. Riggs shined his flashlight directly into Marcus's eyes, trying to provoke a natural flinch or squint. He did not introduce himself or explain the stop, violating the department's standard operating procedure. "License and registration," he barked, hoping to make the driver fumble with his wallet in panic. Marcus moved slowly, narrating his actions to ensure there was no confusion about his reaching hands. "My license is in my left pocket, officer," he said with a voice like grinding stone. Riggs snatched the plastic card without looking at it, his eyes scanning the back seat instead. He was looking for duffel bags or boxes that might contain cash he could seize tonight. "Where are you coming from, boy?" Riggs asked, using a tone designed to demean the man. "I am traveling from a gym, officer," Marcus replied, omitting any details about his true origin. The lack of deference in Marcus's voice made the sergeant's jaw tighten in visible anger. Riggs decided right then that this driver was not going to drive away with his freedom. The officer leaned closer to the window, preparing to deliver the lie he had used thousands of times. "I smell the distinct odor of marijuana coming from the vehicle," Riggs stated with practiced confidence. It was the magic phrase that bypassed the Fourth Amendment and allowed him to search without a warrant. Marcus did not argue or raise his voice. He simply stared at the officer's nameplate. "That is impossible, officer, as I do not smoke, and this is a rental car," he said. Riggs sneered, hating when suspects tried to use logic against his absolute authority on the roadside. "Step out of the car now," Riggs ordered, opening the door before Marcus could unlock it. "I do not consent to a search," Marcus stated firmly, citing the law without sounding desperate. This refusal was the spark that ignited the officer's explosive temper and sealed his fate. Riggs did not care about consent because he planned to find something illegal no matter what. He grabbed Marcus by the hoodie, eager to put his hands on a man who talked back. The violence escalated instantly as Riggs decided to forego verbal commands for immediate physical domination. He did not wait for Marcus to unbuckle his seatbelt before yanking him sideways. The fabric of the hoodie tore as the officer hauled him through the open door frame. Marcus did not fight back. He went limp, allowing the officer's momentum to betray him. "Stop resisting!" Riggs screamed for the benefit of the recording, though Marcus was perfectly still. The sergeant threw him face first onto the wet gravel, pressing a knee into his spine. He wrenched Marcus's arm back with force enough to dislocate a shoulder, applying the handcuffs tight. "You want to play lawyer?" Riggs hissed into his ear, tightening the metal cuffs further. Pain shot through Marcus's arm, but he filed it away as evidence for the lawsuit. He lay in the mud, breathing steadily, waiting for the officer to make the next mistake. Riggs stood up, dusting off his pants, feeling the adrenaline rush of total control. Riggs walked back to his patrol car and reached for the switch on his chest. He tapped his body camera twice, waiting for the red light to blink off into darkness. "Camera is off," he muttered to himself, believing he had just erased the eyes of the world. He failed to remember that the dashboard camera in his cruiser had a 30-second audio buffer. The microphone inside the car was still recording every sound from his wireless belt-pack transmitter. He looked back at Marcus, who was lying motionless in the rain, and smirked. "We are going to find something in that car if I have to plant it," he whispered. The dashboard camera captured that sentence with crystal clarity, saving it to a secure hard drive. Riggs walked back to the Taurus, convinced he was the hunter standing over a captured beast. He pulled on a pair of black tactical gloves, ready to tear the rental car apart. He did not know that the mute man in the mud was memorizing his badge number. The search began with the sergeant tossing the contents of the glove box onto the floorboard. He ripped out the center console lining, looking for the hidden compartments common in drug cars. Finding nothing, he moved to the back seat where Marcus's gym bag sat innocently. Riggs unzipped it and dumped the sweaty clothes onto the wet pavement without a second thought. He kicked through the pile, frustrated that he had not found cash or drugs yet. Then he saw a black leather attaché case tucked neatly under the driver's seat. It looked expensive. Too expensive for the type of person Riggs thought he had arrested. He grabbed the handle, sure that this was where the drug money was hidden. "Jackpot," he said aloud, anticipating the thousands of dollars he would seize for the department fund. He placed the case on the hood of the patrol car, directly in the headlight's beam. Riggs unlatched the brass fittings of the case, his fingers trembling slightly with greed. He threw the lid open, expecting stacks of $100 bills wrapped in rubber bands. Instead, he saw neat stacks of files and a heavy leather wallet with a gold emblem. He froze, his brain struggling to process the visual information that contradicted his bias. He flipped open the wallet, and the gold shield of the Department of Justice glittered back. The ID card next to it read, "Marcus Thorne, Senior Special Agent, Civil Rights Division." Underneath the badge was a signed federal warrant authorizing an audit of the Shreveport Police Department. Riggs felt the blood drain from his face, leaving him cold despite the humid night. He looked from the badge to the man in the mud, and the world tilted. He realized he had just assaulted the man sent to investigate him for assault. Panic replaced the adrenaline as Riggs realized the catastrophic magnitude of his error. He looked around the empty highway, wondering if he could somehow undo the last 5 minutes. He stared at the body camera he had turned off, realizing that action proved his malicious intent. He had to cover this up immediately, or he would be spending decades in federal prison. He slammed the briefcase shut and threw it back into the car to hide the evidence. He ran to his radio, his voice cracking an octave higher than usual. "Dispatch, suspect is in custody. He was combative and reached for my weapon." He lied. He needed to build a narrative of self-defense before the federal agent could speak to anyone. "Send backup and a supervisor. I have a Code 3 situation here," he yelled. He was trying to bury the truth under a mountain of police procedure and lies. Marcus watched the officer running back and forth from his position on the ground. He knew exactly what the panic in the officer's movements meant for his case. He heard the frantic tone of the radio call and knew the cover-up had begun. Pain throbbed in his shoulder, but the satisfaction of the trap springing was worth it. He saw Riggs looking at him with a mixture of terror and murderous intent. The officer paced near his head, debating how far he needed to go to survive. Marcus remained silent, knowing that his silence was currently the loudest thing on the highway. Lights from approaching backup units appeared on the horizon, cutting through the dark rain. The cavalry was coming, but they were riding into a massacre they did not expect. The trap was set, the prey was caught, and the hunter was already dead. Riggs stood by the patrol car, watching the cavalcade of blue lights approaching rapidly. He needed to solidify his lie before the other officers could speak to the prisoner. "Watch his hands! He is a fighter!" Riggs shouted to the first deputy arriving. The deputy nodded, trusting the senior officer, unaware he was stepping into a federal trap. They hauled Marcus from the mud, treating him like a violent felon despite his compliance. Marcus allowed them to rough him up, knowing every bruise added to the settlement. "Get him in the cage," Riggs ordered, his voice trembling with rage and fear. He needed Marcus away so he could figure out what to do with the case, but the deputy paused. "Sarge, you want me to log his vehicle for impound?" Riggs froze, realizing he could not let them inventory the car without planted drugs. "No, I will handle the tow," Riggs snapped, desperation leaking into his strained voice. The deputy shrugged, but noticed the sergeant's sweating forehead, filing that oddity away for later. The ride to the station was suffocatingly silent as Marcus sat in the cramped back seat. He stared at the wire mesh, rehearsing the federal statutes he would soon weaponize. The rookie officer driving glanced in the mirror, expecting the suspect to beg or curse. "You picked the wrong night to fight a cop," the rookie said, sounding tough. Marcus remained mute, his silence unnerving the young officer who was used to drunken excuses. They pulled into the sally port, the heavy steel doors clanging shut like hell's gates. Riggs met them there, having raced back to the station to intercept the booking. "I will take him from here," Riggs insisted, trying to grab Marcus's arm again. But the booking sergeant, a stickler for rules, stepped in between them with a clipboard. "Procedure, Dave. He goes through the metal detector first," the sergeant said, saving the department. Riggs backed off, his eyes darting like a trapped animal, realizing control was slipping away. The booking room was cold, sterile, and smelled of bleach and stale, burnt coffee. They took Marcus's fingerprints, pressing his hands onto the digital scanner with unnecessary force. The machine beeped, processing the biometric data against the National Criminal Database in real time. Riggs stood in the corner, tapping his foot, praying the system would show nothing. The computer screen flashed red, not for a warrant, but for a restricted alert. "What is this?" the booking officer muttered, squinting at the words, "DOJ Level 5 clearance." The room fell silent as the officer looked from the screen to the prisoner. "System says notify the watch commander immediately," the officer announced, voice dropping to a whisper. Riggs felt his stomach drop, realizing the digital trail had just outpaced his lies. "It is a glitch," Riggs lied quickly. "Just put him in the cell now." But the officer shook his head. "I cannot override a federal flag, Dave. Sorry." Chief Harrison arrived 20 minutes later, wearing a raincoat over pajamas and a grim expression. He walked straight to the holding cell where Marcus sat calmly on a steel bench. "Open it," Harrison ordered, ignoring Riggs, who was trying to intercept him with explanations. The heavy door swung open, and the chief stepped inside, looking at the bruised prisoner. "Agent Thorne?" the chief asked, his voice echoing off the concrete walls of the block. "I am," Marcus replied, standing up slowly to reveal the mud on his face. "You have my credentials in your sergeant's patrol car," Marcus added, dropping the bombshell. The chief turned slowly to face Riggs, eyes burning with betrayal and cold fury. "Is this true, Sergeant?" Harrison asked, his tone leaving no room for prepared lies. Riggs opened his mouth, but the weight of the truth crushed his ability to improvise. "I thought he was a dealer," Riggs stammered, sealing his fate with an admission. "Badge and gun on the desk now," the chief commanded, voice slicing through tension. The other officers in the room watched in stunned silence as the sergeant was stripped. Riggs fumbled with his holster, hands shaking so badly he dropped the magazine on tile. The sound of plastic hitting the floor was the loudest noise anyone had ever heard. "You are relieved of duty pending investigation," the chief declared, following the protocol perfectly. Marcus walked out of the cell, rubbing his wrists, watching the predator become the prey. "I want the Dashcam footage secured by the FBI," Marcus stated, taking command immediately. The chief nodded. "It is already being pulled, Agent Thorne. We will not bury this." Riggs looked at his colleagues for support, but they all looked away, distancing themselves. The brotherhood of the badge evaporated the moment the words "Federal Investigation" hung in air. 2 black SUVs rolled into the lot before dawn, carrying the federal cleanup crew. The FBI agents moved with precision, seizing logbooks, computers, and the patrol car itself. They found the briefcase where Riggs had thrown it, a silent testament to the crime. Inside the precinct, tech specialists were already downloading the digital nervous system of the car. "We have audio," the lead technician called out, plugging headphones into the secure terminal. They listened to the 30-second buffer, the ghost in the machine Riggs had forgotten. The room heard the chilling whisper. "We are going to find something in that car." It was the smoking gun, the undeniable proof of intent no lawyer could explain. The chief closed his eyes, knowing that single sentence would cost the city millions. Marcus stood by the window, watching the sunrise, knowing the long night was over. The police union rep arrived with a swagger, ready to defend the officer against allegations. He stormed into the chief's office, demanding to see his client and the charges. "You cannot suspend him without a hearing," the rep shouted, playing to the audience. The chief simply turned the monitor around and pressed play on the Dashcam audio file. The rep's face went slack as he heard the fabrication recorded in high definition. He listened to the end, then picked up his briefcase without saying a word. "We cannot defend this," the rep whispered to Riggs, walking out of the room. Riggs was left alone at the metal table, realizing he had been cut loose. The abandonment was total. The system he protected was now feeding him to wolves. He realized that loyalty only flowed one way, and he was on the wrong side. The federal courthouse was packed with reporters, activists, and public hungry for justice. Riggs sat at the defense table, looking small in a suit that did not fit. His defense team moved for dismissal based on qualified immunity, their standard shield against accountability. The officer acted within his discretion, the lawyer argued, trying to normalize the violence. The judge, a stern woman with zero patience, peered over her glasses at him. "Fabricating probable cause is not discretion, it is a crime," she ruled, striking the gavel. The denial of immunity sent a shockwave, stripping Riggs of his financial protection instantly. He looked back at his family, seeing the shame etched into their faces forever. Marcus sat in the front row, taking notes, ensuring every procedural step was followed. The jury deliberated for less than 3 hours, a speed that signaled unanimous condemnation. They returned with a verdict that read like a laundry list of constitutional violations. "Guilty on all counts," the foreman read, his voice steady and clear in silence. Riggs closed his eyes as the reality of a decade in a cage settled. The judge sentenced him to 12 years in prison, citing the breach of public trust. "You used the badge as a weapon. Now you will live without it," she said. The bailiffs moved in, clicking the handcuffs onto Riggs. The sound he inflicted on thousands. He was led away through the side door, vanishing from the world he commanded. It was a complete inversion of power, a symmetry that felt almost mathematical in precision. The city settled the civil rights lawsuit for $8.5 million. It was a historic sum, meant to bleed the budget enough to force systemic change. Marcus signed the paperwork with the same cheap pen he used to write lists. He did not buy a sports car or a mansion with the proceeds of pain. Instead, he stood on the steps of the courthouse and announced the Thorne Fund. "This money will arm the innocent against the corrupt," he told the assembled press. The camera panned out, showing the former precinct of Dave Riggs in the background. The rain had stopped, washing away the mud, leaving the streets clean for once. Marcus walked away into the crowd, a quiet man who had made the loudest noise.